so much of the work that I do at Imagine Beyond now combines creativity, it combines the context of understanding the shifts around technology and what that means for leaders, organizations and cultures, but also it's weaved through with so much of the people aspect, the neuroscience, the psychology, the really understanding why we do the things that we do. And I just feel so lucky to be able to do what I love every single day. When we lean more into the analytical circuitry in our brains, that actually diminishes the social circuitry. When we lead more into the social circuitry, that actually diminishes our analytic neural pathways. And obviously the more that we do the same thing, the more ingrained those pathways become. For me, it was just a realization, this is not healthy for me. This is not bringing out the best in me. And actually, I need to take a break from this.
Ambition is not a dirty word. Impact is not synonymous with struggle. In fact, massive impact is absolutely possible with joy, fun, and sublime integrity. I'm Bianca Bess, author and founder of The Burnout Business, and this is the Big Impact Show, where success meets grace. Today, on this gorgeous sunny day, I'm absolutely thrilled to be joined by none other than the vibrant Claire Koryczan. Claire runs Imagine Beyond, which is fueled with affecting humanity positively as well as leaders. And Claire is going to tell us all about her business, life as an entrepreneur, life shifting out of the corporate realm into running her own business, and share all about the highs and the lows and how she maintains this realm of vibrant vitality and ensures that she doesn't burn out while she's navigating the wonderful world of work that she inhabits. So wonderful to have you here, Claire. How are you?
Oh, amazing, Bianca. Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. And I'm very excited to be with you here today to have this conversation together. So thank you.
My pleasure. And I love that you're in yellow. Love it. You're representing sunshine and vibrancy. And that's very much the conversation that we're going to have today. So tell our viewers and our listeners your story.
Oh, so my story, it has three different components to it. I call it the trifecta, which is creativity, technology, and people. And really that mirrors my entire career, because right in my early years, in my formative years, before I even started in the world of work, I grew up in a very entrepreneurial household and family. My dad was a small business owner. His dad, my grandfather, was also a small business owner. And so my surname, Koryczan, comes with that heritage in terms of that entrepreneurial space. So it was a very creative environment. I went to a creative school and did a creative degree, and really kind of cut my teeth in the early part of my career, the first 10 years in creative agencies and consultancies, and really loved being part of all of that creativity, understanding psychology, marketing, all of those wonderful things. But after about 10 years and subsequent rounds of redundancies in the industry at the time, I was quite burnt out, and I wanted to take a career break. So I took 6 months out. At that time, I retrained to be a coach, which was one of the best decisions I could have ever made back then, Bianca, because I've been doing it for well over a decade ever since then. And then I stumbled across a tiny little startup who were on a mission to teach the world to code, and absolutely fell in love with the proposition, because the creative world that I'd come from, everyone was kind of talking about digital transformation, and there was only one or two people that actually knew what digital was, and we were always trying to pull them into meetings with us. And so demystifying this whole space back then, I just thought, wow, these guys are really onto something, and joined them as the 7th employee, and was part of growing that business into a global business over 6 years, and it was amazing, Bianco. I got to be in the boardrooms of FTSE 100s, Fortune 500s, teaching business leaders about what this incredible world of technology and innovation is all about. And it really opened my eyes to the possibilities. And then after that experience, I did some more learning around neuroscience in leadership, got a practitioner and a teaching qualification. And then I was ready. I was ready to set up Imagine Beyond in 2019 and really help individuals, teams, and organizations to really imagine beyond their current reality and envision and help them move towards that future that they want to build and to aspire and to create. And so much of the work that I do at Imagine Beyond now combines creativity, it combines the context of understanding the shifts around technology and what that means for leaders, organizations, and cultures, but also it's weaved through with so much of the people aspect, the neuroscience, the psychology, the really understanding why we do the things that we do. And I just feel so lucky to be able to do what I love every single day. So, yeah.
Wonderful. And that comes across, that passion and that enthusiasm, that really comes across. It's very powerful. So the name, Imagine Beyond, that in its very essence is very stimulating and motivating. Can you illuminate a little bit more on where that name came from?
Yeah. So, well, first of all, thank you for asking me that question because that question doesn't come up very often. People often say, "Oh, I really love the name," but they don't necessarily ask where it comes from. So, it actually comes from my heritage. So both of my grandparents on my mother's and my father's side came to the UK, one from Poland, one from Italy, and really were able to imagine beyond their current realities and create new lives in this country. So that, and I don't share it very often, but that part, that DNA in terms of really envisioning a new future and be able to make it happen using persistence, resilience, perseverance, creativity, resourcefulness, trust and belief, that you've got all of what it takes in order to do it, even if you don't know how to. So that is part of the DNA of who I am, but also that's where Imagine Beyond comes from.
Beautiful and so powerful. And that's, I totally empathize with sort of my work thrust. There's definite similarities there where it's trying to support leaders and individuals to step beyond perhaps self-created limitations. And do you bring that into your work? If you think about the clients or the teams that you start working with, where are they when they first arrive, and where are you taking them to as you get them to imagine beyond?
Yeah. Well, if I take it on an individual level, so from a coaching perspective, so I was working with this amazing C-suite lady who's very analytical in a very analytical role, but incredibly creative. And through our work together, she was able to tap into more of that visionary leadership, that creative expression, so much so that throughout our time together, and we only had 6 sessions together, but by the end of that, she was so clear on what she wanted to do in this next chapter of her life. She had reduced down the analytic in terms of what she was doing and really ramped up the creativity. And she is so much in her authentic, alignment with her purpose and herself. And every time I speak to her, she's just beaming with positivity and happiness, and it's just beautiful to kind of been one tiny little chink of part of that journey.
Lovely. That's really such a beautiful depiction of shrinking the left brain and going into the right brain, and shush analytical logic and hello creative and intuitive.
Yeah, and I'd love to do, I'm really pleased you said that, Bianca, actually, because there was something that in my exploration of some of the work that I've been doing recently, I discovered a piece of research which was an absolute aha moment for me, by an article in the Science Daily. And what they were talking about in there was exactly that. When we lean more into the analytical circuitry in our brains, that actually diminishes the social circuitry like the empathy and all of those things, and vice versa. When we lead more into the social circuitry, that actually diminishes our analytic neural pathways. And obviously, the more that we do the same thing or similar things, the more ingrained those pathways become. But what's really interesting about this is when we think about the world that we live in now in terms of technology and AI, and this is where I started to get really excited. It's like the AI and the generative AI can do a lot of the analytical for us. And so, what that presents us with is this beautiful golden opportunity as leaders, as people, as human beings, to actually lean more into those aspects that make us human. You know, the social connectivity, the creativity, the connection, all of those beautiful things that make us human. And so, when I discovered that recently, I was like, this is we need to lean more into this.
Well, it's interesting as well when you think about how that gives us energy. So even as you start describing this, the separate descriptions, when you're talking about sort of the analytical and the logical, it's almost it's a little bit more perfunctory, and it's how we describe it is flatter than how we would describe the creative, the social, the connection. So I mustn't forget that you're here as an expert in neuroscience, and that is, way it elevates way beyond perhaps just the rudimentary principles of coaching into what's actually going in neurologically. So something I'm really interested in as a mother of four, and I know you're a mother as well. So, and there's a lot of discussion around adolescence, the film, and generally around our adolescence. And I'm reading a book at the moment by Gabor Matt and another psychotherapist, and a book called Hold On to Your Kids. And it's really examining what's going on with children today and how we're losing that control, if you like, because we've lost the natural historic hierarchy where parents and teachers had control, and now we've got the youth of today leaning into peer orientation, so they're actually a bit rudderless in terms of who to follow, because they're following each other, the blind leading the blind. Anyway, sorry, long looking at what's happening to children today. So I'm interested in your experience, both leaders and children, where we're in this world of technology and it's slowing down the prefrontal cortex. I know that I read Dopamine Nation recently, and the author was explaining well, and she explains that the prefrontal cortex is actually starting to shrink, where we're so reactive to stimulus that we don't think. And so our children, this whole generation, are growing up with shrinking grey matter because they're dependent on their little devices in their hands. So what? Yeah, I mean, what do you make of all of that? And what can we do to support ourselves and our children to not shrink our prefrontal cortex?
Yeah, well, we definitely need our prefrontal cortex for creative thinking, problem solving, executive functioning, connecting the dots, strategy, thinking ahead, reflecting, all of those amazing things that part of our brain can do. What can we do? I guess the key thing is, the first thing is around awareness, isn't it? It's about, just as you quite rightly said, Bianca, that dopamine reward trigger is very, very powerful. And in young, underdeveloped brains, it's even more potent. It's like an insane spike in terms of the chemical reaction that's going on inside of the body around dopamine, and it's very rewarding, and so it feels really good, so we want more of it, and so therefore we start to develop habits that aren't necessarily very helpful to us, and in an underdeveloped younger brain it's much harder to break those habits, because again, you're ingraining those neural pathways, aren't you? You're creating an autopilot habitual behavior that isn't even, you don't even think about it. And I read a stat recently that was saying something like, I think it's 45% of our daily behaviors are habits. And if you think about that, the amount of habits that we're in where we're not even thinking about what we're doing, we're just in a habitual behavior. The younger that we train our brain in that way, the much harder it is to, hack and rewire those neural pathways. It's not impossible though. I would say some key things that can really help us, first of all, obviously, is awareness, but also just understanding what's going on in the brain, understanding what's going on, and to try and create some different types of cues. There's a great book called The Atomic Habits by James Clear. I'm sure you've read it. He talks about a lot of different ways in which to really break the routines, and there's some really insightful stuff in there. But it's the first step is recognizing the biochemical reaction, and then putting in some new habits that can really help.
Yeah, thank you. I know I took us off topic there, but it's interesting and I love your expertise. I love it. It's great. It's great. So, as you know, I'm an author of Big Impact Without Burnout because I suffered burnout, but I know that so did you. And part of the reason that you're here exemplifying success with grace is because in your early corporate career, you did suffer burnout. Could you describe what that burnout experience was like and why you got to that crescendo moment of, I'm not doing this anymore, it's not for me?
Yeah, gosh. So, I mean, I guess I would caveat it first of all by saying I love working. And I get an enormous amount of validation, reward, fulfillment, satisfaction. I really enjoy work and contributing in meaningful ways and learning and stretching and feeling out my comfort zone and progressing and just all of that great stuff that comes with a sense of purpose through work. But earlier in my career, if I look back at that sort of towards the end of that decade in the creative industry, what was happening back then was less and less resource, more and more work required. And I guess we're sort of seeing similar things right now with how things are shaping and shifting in the world of business. And, a real drive to want to continue to do my best and, make everything happen and keep to all my commitments in terms of all of those things. But it just went too far. And for me, it was just a realization of, this is not healthy for me. This is not bringing out the best in me. And actually, I need to take a break from this because actually my cognitive processing, because I wasn't getting enough sleep, I was just working way too many hours all over the weekends, really not getting the balance. I was, going out seeing friends as well. On top of that, seeing my family, like really stretching that kind of rubber band in terms of energy and not putting anything back in. And so, being able to take an opportunity to just be, go from human doing into human being, obviously was much needed at the time. But it was quite hard for me because I was so used to like operating at a million miles an hour. And so you kind of have to unlearn and then relearn how to be in a different way. And that was hard because I literally couldn't sit down on the sofa for more than a minute without reaching for my laptop or without, feeling like I needed to be doing something. And feeling guilty if I wasn't, because that's how my brain had been trained and the cultures that I'd been part of and the context that I was coming from. And I guess, if I fast forward now in terms of the work that I do, obviously there are times when I'm still working late into the evening or at the weekends, or if I'm traveling quite a lot, that takes quite a lot out of you. But what I know now, and I've worked with an amazing well-being coach who really helped me to understand where my energy is and how to kind of offset with the antidote of sort of high adrenaline, high cortisol, high dopamine, activities, which is a lot of the work that I do, and punctuate that with, more oxytocin, more connection, more space, to really make sure that if I'm in that high, you know, intense periods, that there are always periods, even if it's just a small pocket, where I'm actually either reading or doing something where I can just reset that balance. And so, yeah, I've just become a lot more mindful, I guess, of my energy. I think it's that, really.
I firmly believe it does all begin with energy. That's absolutely it. And when we can learn to optimize ourselves exactly as you've described, then we can unlock this a boundless potential, actually.
Yeah. And everything is energy. Isn't that a quote from Einstein? And it is so true. When we recognize what gives us energy and what depletes us energy, and how we can, offset and calibrate.
Well, that's it, and it's remembering that energy, we've got an endless well of energy, and it's up to us to learn our natural bioenergetic rhythms to optimize ourselves, to be able to create the energy that we need and know when to rest and rejuvenate so that we can then go forth and do the lovely, juicy stuff that we want to do. One thing that I noticed, and I'm really interested to hear how this reflects in your own story, is around directing energy towards what matters most tends to create more of this good energy, which actually makes us more productive. But the way I describe it is it's around graceful productivity rather than frenetic productivity. And there's a really noticeable difference in our lives when we're directing energy, focus, and attention towards something that almost soulfully matters most. And it can be hard to do that in a corporate environment when you're in a role that perhaps you're diminishing in terms of value, when you're saying, oh, well, I'm not saving lives. I get a lot of clients that say this. And what I try and teach clients to do is get into a place, well, who are you? What's the impact that you want to bring? And how can you bring that into that respective role so that you're still energizing yourself? I'm interested in your undulations of corporate into joining the startup in a really rapidly expanding period to then being an entrepreneur. And really what you've done is redefine success. You've kind of honored your values and clocked back into your own integrity. How would you describe your relationship with productivity over these different periods, thinking about from frenetic productivity to graceful productivity?
Yeah, yeah. So definitely the early part of my career was very frenetic productivity. um, what I've learned though, having done two career pivots from creativity to technology into the entrepreneurial space, what I've certainly noticed is when we are very clear on what our strengths are, those natural gifts and talents that we all have within us that are unique and different in every single one of us. When we are able to really understand what those strengths are, that is when we get into that graceful productivity, because then you're in flow, you're in alignment, you are your most authentic self, and that's the best version of you that there is ever going to be. And that's where there's going to be an abundance of energy, of motivation, of inspiration. It's that absolute alignment with who you are. And I think it took me a little while. It took me about 20 odd years actually to figure out what my actual strengths are, and be now running a business that plays to all of those strengths. So yeah, I think that is a really important part of that journey, to get into alignment with that. Yeah.
And with your parents and your sort of family lineage and what you're doing now, I'm very interested in your personal definition of success, but not necessarily in words, in feeling. What does success feel like to you?
Oh my gosh, how wonderful to think of it in this way. So, my natural inclination is to think of it in words and thoughts, but actually, the feeling let me think. The feeling is going to be so success for me in a feeling, sort of emotively, is excitement first of all, in terms of creating a picture and a vision, and I get really excited about that, and that gives me a lot of momentum and energy to kind of push forward. It is anxiety and uncertainty in terms of, okay, so I've got this vision and I believe in it, and now there's some hurdles that have come up against me. How am I going to get through them? And then it is the emotion of belief and, resilience and, figuring out. And that's, I guess, the creative emotion, the imagination, the what ifs, the how might we, all of those things, into kind of making that vision a reality. So yeah, I guess that was a mixture of words and emotion, but that's kind of how I was able to express what success looks like.
And you were bursting with positive, vibrant energy. I mean, that was just such a lovely way to see you come to life describing success. And it's clearly where you are. Would you say that you're in a place where you feel successful right now?
Yeah, and I feel really in alignment, especially the trifecta, the creativity, technology, people, those three things coming together. Yeah, this really feels like my whole career now makes sense for what I'm meant to be doing.
That's so perfect, isn't it? That's wonderful. Congratulations. So what's next? What do you imagine beyond right now?
Yeah, so what's next is I love collaborating. So there's more collaboration, there's more sharing of my insights and the way that I see the world. There's growing a team, there's working more globally. I have clients in the US and in the UK, but there's more of that. I love working globally. There's more integration with technology, collaboration, not just human, but also tech as well. And what that looks like in terms of business perspective. So it's all of that. Yeah.
Amazing. And when you look ahead and you see a lot of abundant stuff that needs to be done, how do you manage your own fear or anxiety around, whew, that's a lofty goal, or I'm reaching for more stars? How do you step into a big lofty ambition like that?
Yeah, well, it's interesting that you say that, Bianca, because first of all, I guess it's blind naivety. And kind of, I have no problem with coming up with the vision, and then I kind of go, oh gosh, like what's it going to take to actually get there? And sometimes that can feel very overwhelming. But what I've learned through the entrepreneurial experience is actually it's so important to have those like really important visionary goals, but it's the baby steps along the way. What's the smallest minimal step that I can take today that moves me that tiny little bit closer to that vision, to that goal, and then just take a baby step every single day, because over 3 months, over 6 months, over 12 months, over 2 years, that is giant leaps towards that goal and vision. And often, we don't really think, we sort of see the gap and think, oh, I don't know how I'm going to get there, and then don't do it. But I would say baby steps. What's the minimum viable step you can take, and just do that?
I love that. I was going to ask you what would be your one tip to support our listeners and viewers, but I really think baby steps is a perfect piece of advice. So, how can our listeners and viewers get in touch with you, get deeper into your work, and follow you?
Oh, thank you, Bianca. Well, I post quite a bit on LinkedIn, so Claire Koryczan. I'm sure you put in the show notes the spelling of my surname, because it's a little bit Koryczan. It's always kind of one of those tricky surnames. But also on my website, imagine-beyond.co.uk. they're the two places that you can learn more about the work that I do and my perspective on the world. And particularly on LinkedIn, I share lots of different tips, techniques, observations, strategies, loads of different things that come from those three angles: the creativity, the technology, the humanity, the people, neuroscience part. So I always look to kind of sprinkle a bit of that in somewhere in whatever I'm talking about.
Perfect. Well, you do it brilliantly. You do it brilliantly. So thank you so much for joining me today. It's been wonderful talking to you. Thank you so much.
Pleasure. Thank you, Bianca. And thank you to your listeners as well.
So one of the things that struck me most about that inspiring conversation with Claire is how she talks about finally being in a place where she feels the trifecta of her life has brought her to this place where all her experience, all her passions, all her strengths have got her into this aligned place where she feels she's able to make her best possible impact, as though this was her destiny. It's super inspiring, isn't it? And I'm sure you can relate to those feelings of when you feel plugged into your destiny and you suddenly get into a state of, oh, this is where I'm meant to be. This feels right too. So I hope you enjoyed that episode as much as I enjoyed the conversation. And please be sure to subscribe, share, and join me back here for the next episode of The Big Impact Show, where I will be interviewing another inspiring guest who will be explaining to us how they have stepped into their unique realm of their version of success with grace.